Welcome to Build. I'm Laura Haywood. Today's guest, Sarah Brightman, is one of the most celebrated performers in the world. A legendary soprano, perhaps best known for originating the role of Christine Daae in The Phantom of the Opera. She has also achieved significant success as a dancer, actress, and songwriter. She's a pioneer of the classical crossover genre, and her new album, Hymn, will be released November 9th. We'll discuss the album, an upcoming tour, and her illustrious career. First, let's take a look at Sarah Brightman's Hymn.
Valleys deep, mountains so high. If you wanna see God, you've gotta move on the other side.
All my albums are different, but there's always a sort of thread through them. Hymn actually does reflect some of the past type of material that I have sung, going way back to the early 1990s, really. Working with Frank Peterson is always a trip.
I thought we were doing the last verse.
He tends to go off in all these different directions.
It was really inspiring working again with Sarah. After 4 or 5 years, the songs got selected simply because it's tracks that would work well with Sarah. Cool. Basically, you work towards creating a nice overall record.
On you. It's probably a little bit of a medley, if you like. It's a duet. It's a love duet.
We have lots of different choirs involved in the making of the record.
Follow Me from the movie Mutiny on the Bounty. It's very Hollywood and very beautiful to listen to.
Many of Sarah's songs have this epic or cinematic kind of approach and feel.
When I start on an album, I'm always visually thinking of how my tour is going to be, how album covers look. Also, it kind of makes sense that it does sound sort of quite movie-esque.
We have already plans for the tours and lots of ideas flying around at the moment.
To get it on stage for the first time is sort of incredibly exciting. It will be a beautiful tour. When I think of the word hymn, it reminds me of something that's very joyous, that's a very positive feeling. And so that's important and that's good, and I think as artists we bring something to someone's life which is a positive and good thing, because actually that's what music should be doing.
Sarah Brightman, wow. Welcome to Build, and thank you so much for agreeing to come and sit down with me to talk about this glorious new collection.
Oh, well, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here. It's great.
This is a product of 2 years of work, and you can hear it. The sound is so full and so cinematic, as Frank said in that clip. It also has an intimacy about it that makes me feel like, as a listener, I'm in the room with you. How do you balance out that desire for grandiosity and also achieve that intimacy?
I think with this album, I got to the point, I'd actually come off the Russian space program, I came out of it, and I went and found a beach and worked with a wonderful vocal coach and to get myself grounded again. And during this time, my producer rang me and he said, Sarah, it's time, you need to start recording again. And he said, what do you want to do? You've obviously been enlightened in some way. And I said, I want to work with lots of human beings, make a joyous sound. I don't want anything dark, anything dangerous, something that reminds me of my childhood and the church I went to and wonderful, warm human being feelings. So he said, that's great, because I was thinking of choirs. So we started working with choirs, which is a very grandiose thing, but yet is very human, but at the same time, the choir sound is very heavenly. So we got intimate, we got grand. And working through these, all of these lots of songs, we went through lots of songs. It was just a process of elimination of what really suited me, what was good for me at this particular time in my particular headspace. And it ended up being very eclectic, the album, and that's what him is.
Yeah. You've been working with Frank for a long time, your producer. Is it true that this track, the title track, was on a mixtape that he made for you in the 80s?
It was. Actually, when I first heard about Frank, because he co-produced the Enigma project, which was out years ago, and I heard it and got hold of him. And he said, look, I don't know if you're going to like songs I suggest to you, but I'll put on what was a cassette tape then. And I was actually driving up Highway 1 in Los Angeles, and I had a Chrysler LeBaron, had an open top, it was beautiful weather, and I put this cassette tape in not knowing what to expect. And the first song was him, which is an old Barclay James Harvest track, which I knew and I loved and I'd actually forgotten about. And I thought, this is cool. This is an interesting producer to think of this. But in fact, because I wasn't in that place to do a song like that at that time, all these years later, now I'm doing it, and it's the perfect title track for this album. So it just shows how music and songs have their timing in your life.
Absolutely. And I love that it's representative of a sort of then and now, a long relationship, creative relationship. And I can feel and hear the depth of that partnership too.
Yes.
In all of these beautiful pieces. You sing in many languages.
I do.
And a lot of them are represented on this album. Do you speak all those languages as well?
I speak a little of a lot of languages, including only a little of my own that well. So I'm one of these kind of, I'm a bit like a parrot. I can pick things up really quickly if I'm in a country, but I forget them just as quickly. But when you're singing and learning, it's actually a very useful thing to have, because you listen and you grasp the meaning of everything. And so I found that very useful especially in the classical training that I've done.
Do you, how do you decide whether to sing a song in its language of origin or to translate it into English?
I found that most songs, if they're better in their original language, as soon as you start translating them, it doesn't have the same spice to it somehow.
Sure.
And you have to work with really clever lyricists to get that. And even sometimes they say, you know what, it's not as good as the original.
Yeah. The work that I first came to know you for was, of course, Phantom of the Opera.
Yes.
I saw it when I was a little girl, and I continued to go and see it. In fact, I got to be at the gala presentation of the 30th anniversary of Phantom, where you performed your signature song, and it's so lovely to see that you continue to be a part of that Phantom family.
Yes, I mean, it's beautiful, that musical. I take my nieces to go and see it, and it's lovely to see through their eyes, in the younger generation, it's still a beautiful jewel, that the Phantom of the Opera, the actual piece. And I feel very privileged that I had, the composer Andrew Lloyd Webber, actually, I was kind of his muse for the writing of a lot of that. And it was written for my voice and my type of voice. So to actually see women that take on the role of Christine, take it forward, is very exciting for me. I love it.
And that high note, that's an E6?
It might be an E flat. I can't remember. Something like that. D or an E flat.
It is a high note. And it's a good thing it was written for your voice, because I don't know a lot of people who can hit it. But they keep finding them. And the Christines keep that legacy alive.
Yes.
I want to also talk about the fact that you have this classical training and this beautiful operatic sound, but you also have a history of success with pop music. And I feel like sometimes I can hear you consciously turn off your training and sing. I believe in something that I read, you said it was like, sometimes you have to sing like you're standing on the beach and just let your voice out to the water. Can you talk about when you use your operatic trained voice, when you use your sort of more naturalistic voice, and how you decide which is a better fit for each song?
I think that when you choose songs, obviously it's if you're covering a song, for example, it's written in a certain style, so you know from that whether it should be very intimate and, you know, although one shouldn't always, you put some air through the chords, as we say, which gives it that more pop approach, which is a style. But then obviously the pieces that you do by Puccini or whatever classical composer, obviously that's asking for a very different type of voice. And there is a form to classical singing, and it's a trained form, and you need to adhere to that to actually create the sound that the piece that the classical composer was writing for the voice to fit to that.
Do you sing at home? Or is it just a work thing?
No, I do sing at home. I sing in the shower. I do all the normal things that human beings do. I hum. I sing out of tune. I do all sorts of stuff. But
what do you like to sing when you're just alone at home? What do you put on the radio and sing along to?
Well, it's a guilty secret. I actually like doing things that remind me of my childhood from the 60s and the 70s. I find that, for me, that was a very interesting time for music. It became very open for people to actually experiment and do what they wanted to do. So there are all these amazing groups, especially in the 70s, that came up, and David Bowie, and there was Pink Floyd and Queen and all of these things, which, of course, that was my teenager era, so I'll tend to go back to those things.
I understand that you also sometimes, when you're traveling, you go out clubbing.
I do. I find it... Well, I did spend most of the early 90s, actually. I was working in Germany with Frank at that time, and it was quite an interesting life, because I used to go to Italy in the week to work on my voice there with Italian training, and then at weekends I would go back to Hamburg to record. I'd spend my nights in the German dance halls and dance clubs, and of course then there are all the early DJs, which really were absolutely amazing. It was the beginning of it all. So it's been actually fun, my career, because I've done a lot of dance tracks, if you like, in it, and it's been accepted. And I've been always in the dance charts for something that I've been doing, alongside having this wonderful classical crossover career.
I just feel like you're so, like, you've been performing forever.
I know.
And yet you still have this youthful energy, and I think that comes through. It's, again, I keep talking about this album as a study in contrasts, whether it's the grandiosity combined with the intimacy, whether it's it has this timelessness, but it also feels really modern. And then there's this maturity about it that also still has that little sparkle, that little flicker of youthfulness that I think it's fire.
Well, you're lovely. You're doing a lovely interview. Thank you so much.
Well,
I'll come here again if I'm invited.
It's
Very nice.
a dream to sit down with you, because when I was a little girl, I was listening to you and imagining that maybe someday I'd be able to hit that high note.
Oh,
I never got there, but yeah, it's a thrill to just be in the room with you.
Thank you.
You're
very
welcome.
much.
Let's talk about this tour that's happening. You are going to be going on tour for 2 years, 125 plus performances.
Don't tell me, I won't get up and do it.
Oh, no, I was going to say, how in the world do you motivate? Maybe you motivate by pretending you're not doing it. I don't know.
Do you know, the thing is about touring, I tend to take a lot of time between tours, because otherwise I'll do a few concerts, more classical type concerts around the world between that time to keep my hand in, if you like. But I tend to give gaps so that I have the energy and the passion, because you can lose the passion when you're on tour, because it's exhausting. But you know, when I go, I don't think about how long it's going to go. I just enjoy the journey. I enjoy the country I get to. I enjoy meeting new friends. I enjoy meeting fans. I enjoy the whole thing day by day. And suddenly it's all done. And you think, how did I get through that? But I feel incredibly lucky that I'm able to go around the globe and do these things, because I get to see and understand all these different cultures, and everybody's great to me. I'm very lucky.
Is there anywhere you've never visited that you're dying to go, or have you just been everywhere at this point?
I've probably been to all the main cities. I can't think of anywhere particularly at this moment, but there must be quite a few.
You've never been to Antarctica, have you?
No, that's one I do want to go, but I want to go, I want to go in that ship that takes you there. I would just be, a friend of mine's just done it, and he said it was absolutely amazing, and I must do it.
And you have to sing while you're there, so then you can say that you've performed on all 7 continents.
Exactly.
What are you looking forward to most about touring? I mean, I know you just mentioned some things. Anything you left out?
Do you know, I think when you create an album, and I'm always thinking of the tours at the same time, you need to kind of get it out. So to actually go on tour is actually a big relief, because everything that you've been thinking in your mind for a few years suddenly can be out there visually, audibly, everything. And it's kind of each show I do, it's a sort of relief that I've done it, because I've done it for that audience, which, if they want to, they've been waiting for it.
Do you travel with choirs? Are you using a big choirs on the stage in this?
Do you know, this time it's been quite interesting. We've actually done a film cinema event of the new album and retrospective and part of it of my old work. It's not going to be exactly like the tour, but it was a very interesting event, and I learned a huge amount from it about really what I wanted and what I didn't want in the tour itself. But I feel with the tour, I'm going to be putting it into 2 halves. So the first half will be more like you're going to see the opera. There are scenes, and I've got a storyline in my head, and beautiful costumes. They're all sort of like they're runway gowns, but I've done things to them, so they become more of the scene that I want to have. Like I've got a modern runway gown which looks like something, I've made it look like something that Anne Boleyn would have worn all of that time ago. So it's got there's a real fusion approach to it. And then the second half, I've got obviously the orchestra and the band on stage with me with this huge choir behind me, rather than being more in the background. And because this album for me was about hope and light and good things in life, because I sometimes feel we're a little bit dystopian at the moment in the world, and that's why I wanted to do something like this. So I've created, or I'm being helped to create, an amazing lighting for it, so that people feel very, very ebullient and just enjoy it in the way that this picture looks, really. It's reaching out to the heavens, and it's about human beings.
This is like glam to the max. I feel like you look kind of like an Oscar, yes, and an impressionist painting. Every woman needs a version of this, I think, at some point in her life. You're back in New York right now doing press for the album. I know you were here, obviously, for a long time doing theater. What are your favorite things to do when you're visiting New York, when you're back?
I love New York. I actually have an apartment here, a very small apartment, which for me, when I get into it, it's just great. I think, oh, good, I'm home. And I go and I love eating the food here. I love the whole buzz in this city. I love the park. I don't know, there's every time I come here, I have a wonderful, wonderful time. And I love New Yorkers. They're out there and they tell you what you think. And it's very different to us in England, who are all like, oh, I'm not quite sure, and very polite and,
Do you get recognized when you go out in the park on the street?
Not at all.
Really? You're a global superstar. I would expect people would just be mobbing you.
No, I don't look like this when I'm running around.
Do you go to the theater when you're here?
Yes, sometimes I do. Well, I mean, but you know what? Nowadays, it's really difficult to get into things because, I mean, Broadway, it's just had this complete resurgence and it's packed, and which I think is an amazing thing because, you know, the city's known for this. And when it's being so successful in that way, I love it. Because there's nothing better to going to see something live and get pulled into that story. I mean, I love movies. I love them. But at the same time, there's nothing like live theatre. So it's great here for that.
I think my favorite album of yours historically was The Songs That Got Away. And as a theater lover, to hear those numbers that were created by musical theater composers, whether it was Sondheim or Irving Berlin, to get a sense of these. You just did such a service to the theater community by recording those.
Yes, you know, there are always those jewels that aren't quite recognized. And it was actually, I remember I had this big sitting room at the time, drawing room, and the whole place for months, because I did loads of research on it, was littered with scores and things. I was trying to find everything out of them. I think my favourite piece in that was a piece called Meadowlark, which I love to sing. It's so lovely.
One of the great pieces, yes, absolutely.
And then I think there was, I Remember Sky in that Sondheim piece. You know, some lovely, lovely, unusual jewels in there.
Yeah, everything you record is gorgeous. I would sound like a broken record if I just went through your entire catalog. Every time I hear that pure tone come out of you, I wonder how in the world do you maintain it, especially when you're touring through different time zones and you've got to be like, if you're flying, you've got the weird air in the airplanes, and plus just the effort you have to put into create those noises. Do you have secret, like, tea and honey combinations, warm-ups you do? Are you steaming your voice? It's got to be like an Olympic athlete in terms of the endurance.
There's no secret to it. It is just about the in-between times that I have between tours, albums, all the things I do, and even when I'm doing them, I work with vocal coaches continually. And my mind is always on it, because that's what defines me, is my voice, really. You can have all the ideas, but if that's not working. So I sleep huge amounts. I have a lovely life, but it's not a party life in any way, apart from obviously going to clubs. But you're not talking there. You're just dancing and getting rid of energy. I eat very carefully. I do everything possible to protect. When I go on the plane, I have a special little mask I wear. It's very easy. It's not expensive, but it works. It keeps the moisture going. And I keep as far away as I can from colds, flu injection. I do all of the stuff you can. And that's all you can do. But I've managed very well with it through the years. And as I said, the most important thing is the training and having a second pair of ears work with you all the time.
I hope you've got those vocal cords well insured. That's not a question.
Actually, I don't know if I do.
Well, you definitely should. You definitely should.
Thank you.
If I asked you what your favorite track from the album is, do you have one, or is it one of these things where it's like choosing between your children?
Do you know, although it's an unusual one, there's a beautiful piece called Fly to Paradise. And I actually had a huge amount of trouble getting Frank to do this piece, because he said, I can't see how it can work, because it was originally written by a gentleman called Eric Whittaker, who is like the choir meister of the world at the moment. He's writing all these wonderful pieces for choir. He's a modern composer for choir, and all the choirs love him. And I heard this piece, which I think, if I'm not mistaken, he wrote originally for a musical about 10 years ago. And I heard the piece, I thought, that is such a beautiful piece of work, and I wanted to work with it. So I got Frank to just start on it. And by the end of it, he said, actually, this is one of the best pieces on the album. And I hope that Eric's happy with it, because I've been talking to him for years, just on the phone and meeting up and whatever. And so finally I've been able to do one of his pieces, so...
Yeah, I loved hearing about, in some of the interviews that I've read, about how you and Frank have this push and pull about sometimes he'll want to do something and you're not sure about it, and you want to do something. But I think that's what makes for a great partnership that, again, encompasses so many seemingly contradicting characteristics.
Yes. No, you're right about that. I mean, there are many partners. I'm not saying I'm Lennon and McCartney or anything as grand as that. But you find that often partnerships, they argue a huge amount. And one is black, one is white. But it's actually very good that when the two do come together, they both of their ideas create a particular flavour, and often an audience really enjoy that. You can feel the tug within the work. Sure. It makes it interesting.
Yeah, tension in art, I think, is necessary.
It is very necessary.
Don't want it to be too easy.
No.
We're going to give a couple of audience members a chance to ask some questions.
Okay, thank you.
Where are we starting?
Hi. Over here. Hello.
Oh, hi.
Hi. I'm right here.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being here. I'm super excited to listen to your album. I was just wondering who some of your artistic influences are.
Oh, so many. I mean, when I was much younger, on the classical side, I loved Joan Sutherland's voice. I was absolutely fascinated by it because of the beauty and the tone she had. And artistic ability she had, and also the training that she did. She was incredible for me. I think probably the group which kind of got me into the whole idea of wanting to do something very theatrical with my music actually didn't so much come from theatre. It came from Pink Floyd, because it was themed, and I love themes, and I always theme everything that I do. So they were two examples from either end.
I
Thank
love
you.
the idea of you like rocking out to Dark Side of the Moon.
Oh, I loved it at that time.
Yeah.
Well, I hope I don't sound old here. But those pieces, you know, they're timeless. You could put them on anywhere and people love them.
I
so.
love an album that you can listen to front to back, you know?
Yes.
That doesn't, it's still good if you put it on shuffle, but the full experience is track one all the way through the
Yes,
end.
I love
That's
it.
how I listened to this one, and I think it's a full work, you know?
Thank you.
We have time for one more question.
Hi, hello. Here again.
Oh, there you are. Sorry. Hi.
I wanted to know, how important is your posture when singing opera, and what are like some tricks or life hacks that you've learned?
Do you know, lot of the time I don't get it right because I'm in a form of tension, and you continually have to work with this. It's very, very important that the spine is straight, the shoulders are relaxed, so that it gives room for the lungs to move in the way that they should. I feel that the form is important because it's almost as if I feel the sound from just behind my spine, and it feels as if it's going up right through the center, and the sound sort of has to feel, because of the posture, as if it's something that's inside of you. So you're not grasping at notes and biting them and all of those things. And of course, none of us are perfect in this, and I make mistakes all the time. But that's the perfect way that, you know, I like to sing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The way that you talk about the sound as if it's something separate from you, it feels like something otherworldly. It feels like it's something that is from, you know, it like almost makes you, it connects with the heavens, you know? And I think what a perfect place to end in bringing it back around to the concept of light and about spirituality. Hymn is out November 9th. Sarah Brightman, it has been a true honor to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you to all of you. Thank you.